Like, yeah, well, that's all a factor, but you can't control that. With performance and with competing, I can control what I can control. So what can I do to make sure I have the best outcome on any given day?
Today, Chloe Brennan is with me.
Chloe Brennan, here we go. And she's got him!
Wow! Yes! Wow! Yeah!
Unbelievable!
And that was quite, let's say, a career booster for you then.
Massively. Social media is real annoying, but it's something that's very helpful in our sponsorships, in the coaching business as well. I think I gained like 20,000 followers overnight. It just blew up, and people everywhere wanted to know who I was and what I did, which was a little uncomfortable at first, a little bit overwhelming, but it has massively helped my career now. It was hard because I was then known as like the Dunny Stone girl, whereas I actually went out there to do the Arnold Amateur and I came second in a world championship and I was buzzing with that. And like obviously I'm a strong woman, but I became known as like the Stone girl rather than the strong woman, and that was a bit like, oh, this is. So that was cool, but I do these other things as well.
Yeah. Guys, I just want to take your attention for a second before the episode starts. This episode is sponsored by Silverback Gymwear. It is the best gym brand for gym gear if you are wanting to be strong within the industry. It's something that I've used for a very long time within all their gear. T-shirts, shorts, socks, they sell everything, clothing, apparel. And it really is something that I always tell people, and it's the truth, that their quality is second to none when it comes to your different brands. So please take a moment to check them out and make sure that you get some gear so you can be stronger. Okay, so we are here now, The Line Mind, on episode 3. And as always, and I think I said this last time, I've always got an exciting guest, and that's the whole reason I get these people on the show. But today, Chloe Brennan is with me, who is, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, one of my favourite strong women.
Oh, thanks.
And you won't hear me say that to anyone else, so don't worry. But no, I followed you quite some time. I remember when we first met. It was at one of your shows, I remember that, but that was the first time I spoke to you. And yeah, I'm not going to pretend I'm a fanboy because, you know,
you are a fan.
It's going a bit like that, isn't it? So I'll stop there. But no, tell us who you are, where you came from, without saying your mum, and sort of like what got you to your position you're in life at the moment.
Okay, so my name is Chloe. I am 27 years old, pretty normal gal. I am now a strength coach working predominantly online with mainly strongman athletes, but also athletes from other sports. And I compete in Strongwoman. Not always been a coach, so I was a nurse before I came into this job. And prior to that, I was a support worker, working with people with learning disabilities, and then kind of in my athletic endeavours also did trampolining to like a lower national level and coached that as well. So I've always kind of coached in some way and competed.
People,
I've always been very into sport, and that's kind of, I guess, an overview of my career. Very normal upbringing, I would say. Like,
what's normal?
Wow. Nothing too drastic. Brought up in Tamworth. Parents split when I was about 8, but very amicable. So it's not like there's any disaster that went on there. And yeah, that's it. Just me.
With where you're at the moment, you've hit quite a peak, though, haven't you? In your
in strongman. I've done all right.
Strongman or strongwoman?
I don't care what it's called. I really don't care what you call it. I've done pretty well, and I think it's taken me a while to sit back and be like, oh, you know what? I've done well. Like, I was on a panel a few weeks ago in Norway with Nick Best, Ed Cohen, Ode Haugen.
Cool.
Yeah, and I was like, oh shit, like this, I feel really out of place. And a few people have said since then, they're like, no, like you belong there.
No, you do.
So yeah, I won England's Strongest Woman in the under 64 kilo class. I was the first woman to lift the Rogue replica Dunny Stones.
Yeah.
No straps. That was pretty wild. That changed a lot of things for me.
Yeah.
I won.
Rightly so. It was.
Yeah.
Pretty insane.
It was crazy. I won the UK Arnold Pro last year, and I am 2 times champion under 73 of the UKNS, UK and Ireland Strongest Woman as well. So
Yeah. And UKNS, just for people that don't know, is the natty scene.
yeah,
so
so
which means you don't take any substances to enhance you.
correct. Yeah, it's a new federation that's just come about, and it's pretty exciting. So I'm happy to be a part of that and to be doing pretty well in it.
No, amazing. Well, we'll dig into that stuff in a minute. But as always, we have this thing where we basically send me a present first of all. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And actually, I will apologise because I told Chloe real last minute. And she was like, fuck, I've got a detour now.
Yeah, so Tesco Express, which doesn't have many things that aren't edible. So you want me to get this present out?
Go for it.
Okay, so
I hope it's massive.
I won't say anything yet. I'll just give it you and see.
And see what I think. Oh, right, shit. Here we go. High performance energy fire lighters. I nearly said firefighters. Come on then, give me the reason behind it.
Well, there wasn't much to choose from other than like sandwiches, beans, soup. So I was like, oh, and then I saw that and I was like, you know what? High performance. We're both athletes. We perform at quite a high level. And I'd say from what I know of you, and obviously I know myself quite well, we're both quite energetic. We are passionate about like lighting fires and people, getting people going on the start of their like journeys. So I was like, you know what? Fire lighters, it'll do.
You know what? I'll give it a 10 out of 10. Look at this.
I don't know if you can pin it to a wall, but
I'll make sure we can. I'll get a shelf for that. That was good. I was going to say, for being on the spot and looking around and going, shit, what can I think of? It's well thought.
And they were only like
£2.50. Buzzing. I'll give you £2.50 back.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So, just a little reminder as well, because I've been told to say this because I always forget. Please remember we're on Spotify and Apple Podcast, as well as YouTube as well. So, yeah, just know that we're all on all the platforms. So please tell people, please follow and please share, because it means a lot when people, I will actually say as well, last week we had some really, really good feedback already. So no, it's amazing to hear that we're, turning people's ears to listen to the really positive stuff and the struggles and everything else that people go through that help them in their journey and hopefully help you. So let's get down and dirty then. I've got a few notes here just because I've literally got a head like a sieve and it's a way of me knowing to stay on track, I guess. But I'm going to flick through a few things, and I don't want to make this too strong man, strong woman based, just because we see it and do it every single day. Plus, there's some really cool stuff to speak about, which we've already spoke about anyway. But just talk us through. So, obviously, you was under 64 before,
Yeah.
and then you went to under 73. Well, you went up to under 73.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
There's a few reasons. First off, the cuts I was having to do to get to under 64 were getting bigger and bigger. I never had to do a crazy cut, but if I would have carried on in that weight class for much longer with the rate I was kind of putting on size, then it would have ended up that I had to do some quite big cuts. And health is massive for me. Like, I love this sport and I'm willing to do a lot of things for this sport, but sacrifice my health is not one of them. And every time you do a big water cut, you're causing acute damage to your kidneys. That's a fact. And that's not something that I wanted to continue doing. Along with that, I was super, super tall for the under 64. So if you look at me in any of the lineups I competed in, I was about a foot taller than everyone else. Like, I am too big to be an under 64, and I'd kind of reached my cap in how much size I could carry. And I know it's not necessarily, size doesn't equal strength, but it does have an impact. And
it does.
The more muscle you have, the more strength potential you have. So in order for me to build my strength and lift more weight and just get stronger, I needed to put on some more size, and the 73 kilo category looked like a really good opportunity to do that. And I mean, I was doing pretty well in under 64s. Like, I came top 5 in 2 world championships. I'd won a national championships. I got 2 world records in that class. And if I would have stayed in that class, I would probably still be doing really well. But I was like, do you know what? I want a bit more of a challenge. I want to lift some heavier loads, see how strong I can get.
It's like a growth aspect, isn't it? And it's really funny, right? And I knew that story about you anyway. And the really funny thing is that I would say the exact same thing if you asked me why I went from 90s to 105s.
Yeah.
Because I was exactly like that. The cuts were getting harder. There's more potential to be given. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think you have to get to a point, don't you, where you think, how am I going to progress any further?
Yeah.
And, you know, to say that the bigger the person, the stronger they are is bullshit, ultimately. But it has a, as long as you are in an athletic state, it has a place, doesn't it?
An absolute strength. There's a reason that the Opens lift more than the weight classes, because you can get stronger.
But I will, you know, throw in there, like, there's a lot of people that are in our categories that are stronger than the Opens.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That I find that so interesting. You know, it's like, just showing off for a second, but when I did that 210 stone, like, a lot of people messaged me saying, what the fuck? What weight are you? Are you Opens? It's like, no.
The Dunny record against Donna and Becca.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a thing.
And with that, just touching on that now whilst you're at it, like, what was the Arnold's? It was Arnold's, wasn't it? You did the So how did you feel when you got invited to that, or did you apply for it?
So I wasn't invited to that. So I was already going over to compete in the Arnold Amateur. Under 64 show. Yeah. So I was prepping for that, and then previous years they'd done the Dinnies for the men, and I was like, oh, they really need to do that for the women one year. And then they were doing it for the women, and they were inviting a lot of the pro women, a lot of who hadn't had anything to do with the Dinny Stones. And I was like, you know what? I've had a go on the real Dinny Stones. Like, I should be involved in this. So I was like, right, who do I contact? So I messaged around, emailed around. This is the week before we flew out. I was like, can I have a go?
So it was that last minute?
Yeah, like, I didn't get a prep for it. The prep I had was like, oh, I'm doing this. I better just make sure I got my technique with, like, 50 kilos and 20 kilos.
Yeah, but luckily you'd played with them enough, right?
Yeah, so I'd had experience before. And yeah, I was just like, I sent out a load of my videos of, like, training videos I'd done in, like, 2019, and me on the actual stones, and just said, this is what I've done. Please, can I come and play? And they were like, okay. They didn't have any T-shirts small enough for me. It was very last minute. I had to run from my event on the main stage over to do it. It was all very rushed, but I think that's kind of what made it so cool.
No, of course. And the fact that you still completed it, like, with all that last minute and everything, is fucking insane.
And then competed in the finals the next day.
How did you actually feel once you'd done that? Because you know that's, like, badass. Like, it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's like, fuck.
Yeah, there's, like, I always say to people, if you could get that feeling and put it in a bottle and sell it, like, I would be the richest woman in the world. That feeling
that's a really powerful way of putting it as
you can't explain that feeling. And, like, I knew I was going to lift them, but I thought Becca and Donna were going to lift them, and I thought they were going to hold them for longer than me. Yeah. So I think it was the whole build up, the fact that they'd failed it, I'd failed it twice and then done it again, and, like, there was a big crowd there because the men had just done their frame carry, which was really fortunate. And yeah, like, if I would have just lifted them and there wouldn't have been a crowd there, like, it would have been cool. But the whole experience was just something I'll never forget. Like, Matt made me walk around the back afterwards, like, where the crowd were. I just wanted to find a physio because I was in a lot of pain. I was like, where's physio? I was like, walk this way. And there's, like, some stands at the back, and as we walked past, people started standing and clapping, and I turned round to the arena. I'm like, oh, what's going on now? And Matt's like, they're clapping for you, Chloe. And literally all these people just, like, started coming down and queuing to, like, have photos of me and speak to me, and I was just like a blubbering mess. And people are asking for photos, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm crying in your photo. It was just really
so there's
overwhelming.
people all over the place with photos of you crying.
Yeah But it was I can't explain it. It was pretty special.
And that was quite, I'd say, a career booster for you then.
Massively, yeah. I like, social media is real annoying, but it's something that's very helpful in our kind of in sponsorships, in the coaching business as well. I think I gained like 20,000 followers overnight.
Yeah, which is insane.
Yeah, so it just blew up, and people everywhere wanted to know who I was and what I did, which was a little uncomfortable at first, a little bit overwhelming, but it has massively helped my career now.
They just wanted a piece, didn't they? But I guess it's one of those things, isn't it, where, like, people want to know just because they want to know, and then then there's some people that want to know a bit more because they're like, well, how did you get there? What are you, you know? like the message that obviously we say to everyone all the time is just fucking work hard,
Yeah.
isn't it? And that's
Yeah.
the thing, isn't it? It's like, but what did you do? I've been doing it for a long time. And I've just worked my ass off.
Yeah.
But yeah, people love to jump in, don't they? Like, and be like, so what have you done? How have you got there? And all that sort of
And
stuff.
it was hard because I was then known as like the Dunny Stone girl,
Yeah.
whereas I actually went out there to do the Arnold Amateur, and I came second in a world championship, and I was buzzing with that. And like obviously I'm a
And then
strong
on top,
woman,
done this.
but I became known as like the Stone girl rather than the strong woman,
Yeah.
and that was a bit like, oh, this is.
So
That was cool, but I do these other things as well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't do not just one trick
Yeah,
pony.
yeah.
So, have you got any Scottish in your family?
None at all.
So there's no connection. So you're fake stone lifter.
I
I
mean,
thought you had to have a bit of Scottish in you too.
Irish, does that count? No, we've just I've been like involved in the people with the Dunny Stones for quite a long time. Like Matt was really into it. We know
Is Matt grip? He does a lot of grip. Am I
More
thinking
stone
right?
lifting
Is
than
it
grip.
Stone lifting, cool.
Yeah, so we know the people around the Dunny Stones through that, and yeah, it's just got very like once you know the history and you know the people around, it makes it so much more special than just two stones.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I did the ones in. Oh, you're gonna have to.
The district ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are they heavier? I feel like they're heavier, but they're
A little bit, but
they're
higher.
higher or something. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I didn't study them much. One of our lads just said, "Oh, we're gonna go." Like
Yeah.
Jack, I think you know Jack Reeton. He was like, "Yeah, we're gonna go. Do you want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And you probably know my grip's not the best. However,
I didn't, but I do now.
I did do it, so I was buzzing. I think I was the
Nice.
only one to do it without straps as well. So yeah. But no, I know what you mean though. Like when you know the history behind things, it is cool, isn't it? Because like, it's not just like just some meathead lifting some shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is obviously what a lot of people think anyway.
Yeah.
So, are you a Stoltman sister as well? What's going on here?
So yeah, so
I mean, not officially, but
yeah, I'm not actually related to them. Last year, so it was at Tom and Luke were at the Arnold.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dan Hipkiss, their coach. I'm good friends with Dan, so we were all spending bits of time together. And then a few months down the line, Luke just messaged me like, "Chloe, do you want to jump on a call? I've got some ideas to bounce around." I was like, "What is this?"
yeah.
And then they wanted to sponsor me, so I am sponsored by Strongwoman Brothers, which is really freaking cool. And there was a lot of around that time I was like, why me? Like, what have I done? But now I'm just like, I'm very grateful, and it's really cool that
Yeah.
they want to support me on my
Why
journey.
is it you? Why do they want you?
I think actually now I think I realise now. I think I'm relatable. I try hard. I'm doing all right. And yeah, they just took a liking to what I do, who I am.
Yeah.
And that it's been really hard actually to say people sponsor me for who I am, because there are people that have got much greater achievements, and I always think they deserve it more than me. But there must be a reason that.
Yeah, but you're a very natural person.
Yeah.
You're very,
Hey.
and that, but,
I like to think so.
But that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's obviously what. That's why people buy into people, right?
Yeah.
It's like in the coaching in the coaching environment. Like there's some coaches that are amazing, but they're dickheads.
Yeah, people buy people.
Yeah. Or you got the flip side where they're really nice people, but they're shit at the coaching.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean that's life anyway, right? That's the world, and that's the world we live in. And
Mm-hmm.
good luck to both sides of it. But at the same time, your people buy into you, don't they? And that's the important part with things like that. And
Yeah.
obviously that's why they bought into you. So you are officially a Stoltman.
Honorary Stoltman
triple.
sister.
No, I say that they've got. There's other Stoltmans, isn't there? It's just because we hear about those.
Yeah,
them
that's
ones,
it.
So let's tap into sort of like the because I'm going to find this really interesting. I know you enjoy this sort of stuff as well. But what are some of the struggles that you've been through in, let's say, in your career? And if there's struggles before your career, obviously that could also follow through. But like, what some of the struggles you've been through in your career? Because I feel a lot of strong women get a lot of stick.
I think I've been quite fortunate in that. Like, I have had my fair share of stick, and obviously when things go viral, people are going to have something to say, and that's happened quite a few times with me with the platform that I've got. But I can probably count on, like, I can remember, like, exact comments that people have said, which to me says it doesn't happen that often. Like,
Got you. Yeah.
it's
yeah.
mainly
Well, that's the only ones that
positive.
they've said.
No, like, written or that
Yeah.
I've read. But it's a massive thing for strong women, and I feel very fortunate that I haven't had too much of the stick. But there's obviously some stuff like fake weights, or oh, look at her penis at minute 1 summit. That's one that always sticks with me. Or like, she's trans. But I just think now, like, I know that's not true. So, but it affects my family more than it affects me. So like, my dad gets quite upset by it. Matt gets really annoyed by it. But personally, I think the struggles in my like strongman career that I faced are less to do with other people and more to do with my own performance, where I haven't done quite as well as I've wanted to do. Or like very early on, like when I first started, so my first competitive year, I won Midland Strongest Woman, I came second at England Strongest Woman, and I came third at Brennan Strongest Woman. First year I'd competed, which was amazing. But then the following year I was like, shit, how do I keep up with that? Like, I felt so much pressure to do well because I'd done so well the first year, and I was like, well, if I don't uphold this, then people are going to think it was a fluke, it didn't happen. So that was a big one. And then the other big one was probably Worlds last year, actually, that I felt really confident going into. And I was like confident I was going to get in top 10 mate finals, which were my best events, and I didn't. And I was like,
where did you finish?
14th. And before the show, I was like, imagine not finishing in the top 10. Like, what would that be like? It'd be awful. Like, how would I go home? And then it happened, and I was like, well,
this is it. This is now what I'm going to feel like.
Yeah. So that was tough.
How do things like that make you feel? Because I've got my views and opinions and things like that, but you're capable of it. But when it gets, let's say, taken away from you, because that's what it feels like, doesn't it? How do you deal with that? Because
I think it's taking responsibility. It wasn't taken from me. And people often, when they don't do as well as they want, they'll give a load of factors as to why. They'll be like, well, if this wouldn't have happened, or if this situation wouldn't have been in place, or if blah, 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 blah. It was just that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough on those days to get the result I know I'm capable of. So I was sad for a bit. I was pissed off for a bit. I cried for a bit on the days. I was like, what the fuck is happening? But I took responsibility, and then it was kind of back to the drawing board. I took some time away from strongman at the start of the year to do Olympic lifting, take my mind off strongman, and then came back in with a new, like, you know what, I can do it, and I will do it, and I'm going to keep working until I do it. So use it as a bit of like fuel to the fire.
Did you ever feel, or have you ever felt in your career like, fuck it? When and why?
Last year. Really? a few times when I'm doing really well and I'm like, I can't uphold this. So like after the Dinny record, it was like, how do I've done this amazing thing, I can't live up to that. Like, that's not me, because it was me, but you have this feeling of like, who the hell was that girl and how did she do that? I can't do that again. So what's the point?
But there's so much circumstantial points, aren't there? Like, I'm trying to not talk for you on this, but it's the same thing in both of our lines, isn't it? Like, I podiumed in everything last year. The next show I do, if I don't podium, what's going on? Like, and it's not that you take it for granted, but you know you're capable of doing that. And the amount of times I've come second and just not come first. Do you know what I mean? It's like, fucking, if this had happened, if that had happened. But it's hard, isn't it? Because it's so circumstantial on the equipment. Obviously, the people you're against. And then there's a lot of tactical stuff, isn't there? So, how do you deal with knowing that the shoulda, woulda, couldas? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because I think that's the tough thing, isn't it?
The shoulda, woulda, couldas apply to everyone, though. And you just have to be very matter of fact with it. And I say it a lot to my clients. They're like, oh, well, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, well, that's all a factor, but you can't control that.
Correct.
Like, with performance and with competing, I can control what I can control. So I ain't going to worry about everything else, because I spent far too many years worrying about everything else, and it never did me any good. So I think my way of dealing with it now is just being very, like, inwardly focused and, like, what can I do to make sure I have the best outcome on any given day. And
that is huge, isn't it, what you just said there? I'm sure you've replayed that yourself, and, you have to tell yourself that, don't you? I have this little mantra, actually, that I've got, that I send it to all my athletes on the day that they compete, and I always read it myself. And it's just about the whole, like, you know, you are in control of what you are in control of, and nothing else.
Exactly.
You need to enjoy the day, because if you don't enjoy the day, you know that's like that whole stress side of things. It becomes worse, doesn't it? And,
Yeah.
And as well, like, don't think about the next event until that one's finished.
Yeah.
You know, when you start to think like that, it's so true, isn't it? Because it's just fact.
Yeah.
However you want to fucking butter it up. Like, I'm sure you've seen all the memes that went around for me at England's. Like, I had a fucking shit show, you know. And actually, it's funny because I'll tap into why it happened later on as well. But I had a bit of a shit show, and I could do so many things, but I still podiumed. And it's like, you know what? It fucking is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line, isn't it? Amazing.
Sure. But I think that's true for, like, anything in life as well. It doesn't just apply to sport; it applies to everything that you do. Whether
No, it does.
And even if you don't do sport, like if you listen to this and you're not an athlete, but you're in, I don't know, in your job or in your family, just think about the things you can control, and you're gonna get the best outcomes.
Yeah. I just want to stop the podcast for a second here, just to mention Silverback Gymwear. These guys are sponsoring the podcast, and I want you to know how good their quality of clothing is. And they've just launched at the moment the new women's brand. So jump onto their website, have a look for could be a wife, could be a daughter, could be a mother, whoever you want to buy it for, or it could be you if you're a female watching this and listening. But please go and check them out. Their quality is really, really good, and they've got so many different colours and different designs to choose from. Okay, so let's talk about struggles, because, you know, this podcast is all about being real life shit, as I've put on the screen. And it's like, people, and you'll know what I mean by when I say this, but people like to know that people have struggles. And let's be honest, you're a very real person. Yeah? And I think that's why we get on, because we're very real, like that sort of thing. And what are some of the struggles that you've been through, like even early stages of your life?
Yeah. So there's a few things. I don't go into detail with them publicly, and I won't yet. But shit happened, stuff that I've had therapy for recently, and they class as a trauma, which definitely impacts the way that I think, behave, do things now. So yeah, I've struggled, and it's something I've only, like, my thoughts on things before, like, I've been told for a long time to get therapy, get help, whatever, with these things, and my view as a problem shared is a problem doubled rather than halved. I thought, talking about it's not going to make anything better, it's just going to bring it all back and make it a horrible situation come back to life.
For you, yeah?
For me, yeah. But it got to a point where it was kind of impacting my day-to-day life. Certain things would set it off, so you might have heard the term, like, trigger. That would happen, and I was like, right, I need to sort my shit out and go and talk to someone about this. If it makes it worse, then it can't be worse than what already happened. It is what it is, but it could help. So I did. I went and got therapy, and the woman that I went to see was fantastic, actually. She had a very holistic approach where she spoke. There's loads of different types of therapy, right? And I know there's a lot of, like, CBT going around, and people are like, oh, this is great therapy. And I was like, it's not going to work for what I've done, because the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviours I have related to what happened are logical. Like, it's not illogical. You don't need to change my way of thinking, because it was what it was. But she helped me to work through what had happened. One of the things I won't talk about, one of the things was one of my friends died when I was 18. Suicide, not necessarily depression, but that happened. That was a pretty big knock. Another thing was just before that, in my teenage years. And yeah, it was shit. All of these things. You know what? There's one thing I won't talk about, but the suicide, and my mum was very ill on and off when I was young. So that was tough. And all of these things had an impact on me, and we worked through these little things, and kind of linked it to the way I am now and things that I do. Like, I'm a massive control freak. I get really stressed and quite possessive over things that aren't in my control, which is really helpful for being an athlete. Like it really, really helps. But in everyday life, it's not easy to live with. And I annoy myself because I know I'm doing it. So we worked through these things and like, oh, okay, so you do this to protect yourself because this happened. And it's gaining that self-awareness has really helped me to kind of step back sometimes when I'm in those situations and be like, okay. And I wouldn't say everything's resolved, but like everyone has struggles, don't they? So it's happened and it's real and it's hard.
Would you say you're still going through that journey then? Like, is that something?
Massively. And I think one of the first, like, so with this therapist, at first you have like a half an hour session just to see if you're a good fit. And straight away in that session, it kind of came to light that I'd become Chloe the Strongwoman, so I didn't have to deal with the shit that Chloe went through.
Yeah. Which is very, very common.
Right. And then I did like my series of sessions and I was like, okay, it's been really helpful. I'm going to come back once a month just to keep ticking over things. And I haven't gone back.
You haven't?
No. And
why?
I think at first I convinced myself it was because I was fine. I was doing okay. I understand things. I don't need it anymore. But actually it's probably just because it was hard. Like it's really hard to face those things and talk about those things. And I know if I go back, I'm going to have to talk about it again. So I'm just like, I'll just be Chloe the Strongwoman a bit more. So yeah, it's definitely a journey I'm still on. And I don't think it's a journey that you ever stop.
No, I agree. Because, the journey never ends, does it? Like, whenever you, let's say, fix something, you find out something else. And it's also not a problem. It doesn't matter, does it? Because everybody always has, let's just call them issues that need addressing. Not necessarily fixing as well. Like, I use the word fix, meaning to manage rather than fix it, because let's be honest, some things can't be fixed. But going back to like when you said you didn't want to share something because you thought it'd be doubled and you'd have double the stress, would you say you still have that same mindset now then?
In a way, I think bringing stuff up is always hard and it does double the problem at the time, but the amount of self-awareness I've gained from sharing it and the amount I've been able to manage my behaviour, especially like with my partner Matt, like little things like if I'd be making dinner and then he'd be like, oh, I'll go stir the chilli, and then he'd like put something else in it and I'd be like, why have you done that? Because I was like not in control of it, and then through talking about it I was like, okay, so at this point in your life and when this happened you had no control, like
so
no control at all.
Trying to gain your control,
So the reason that I am so anal about things and I want them done the way I want them done is because I want to make sure I'm in control, because subconsciously my brain's going, when you're not in control, really horrible things happen. So and
it brings you back to that emotion, doesn't it? But that's why, obviously, I'm sure you study it as well, but that's why the brain does it, right? Because it's that fear factor of, I don't want to feel like that, so I have to do something to protect myself.
That's exactly it.
And
now it's like, okay, him putting a bit more chili in the chili isn't going to ruin my day. It's not going to ruin my life. So you can say that's annoyed me a little bit, but it's happened. Rather than it becoming this massive explosion of.
But it's crazy, isn't it? Because obviously talking about that sounds laughable. But it's also something that everybody has things like this in their life that they struggle with, whether it be down to trauma or just down to general, habits and the way that people are. Yet people don't address them enough.
No, we just ignore it because it's easy to ignore it because it's just the way we are.
So you said your mum was ill. What exactly, like how old was you when you was going through that sort of?
So this was probably from when I was like 5 to like now, even still some stuff that goes on. So, and there's like a few different things. She had like TIA, so like mini strokes and stuff. So she was in hospital for those. I've seen her in resus like twice. I remember like my 5th birthday was spent in a hospital bed, like with my mum. there were times.
Do you remember that? Do you remember being
there's,
5?
There's certain times that I don't remember the time around it, but I remember being on a hospital bed. I remember another time seeing my mum and her not being able to speak. Her speech was really slurred. I remember once when I was more a teenager, she collapsed on the bathroom floor, and it was only me and her there, so I was the one that had to deal with it. And yeah, like there's been different things through kind of growing up, and she confides in me a lot as well, so I had to grow up quite early. And luckily my dad was like, I'm real close with my dad, and he's always supported me, so it's not like I've been on my own. And like me and my mum have a great relationship now, but yeah, those things are pretty, I think you just get on with it at the time, but then I've just thought that was life. And then when I was talking to the therapist, she's like, it's a lot to deal with, that is, at that age. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is.
The thing is, it's so hard, isn't it? Because let's just say pulling your pants up and getting on with it, as that term is, I think it's something like that.
Yeah, something
pull
like
your
that.
big girl pants up, whatever.
Big girl pants, yeah.
I think pulling your pants up just sounds rude. Right, but pulling your big girl pants up and getting on with it is a very strong, driven mentality that obviously you would want to teach anybody, right?
And I think
but
in the
doing
moment...
it at that time was technically wrong.
In the moment, I think you have to put your big girl pants on. You have to deal with what's in front of you. Because of, like, if you start getting too feely in the moment, you can't manage the situation. But once the situation has happened, we're so quick to just move on. And I think sometimes we need to take a minute and go, oh, that was hard.
But being that age, how do you know to do that?
You don't. That's why you just get on with it.
Exactly. So maybe that's that mentality you have grown to, isn't it? And then that's why you felt with the other stuff that you just needed to crack on, because that's a trait. That's a trait, isn't it, that you've learned?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, realizing those things are so powerful, aren't they? So in itself, that is so good for you to reflect on that, right?
Yeah, and I think, like, obviously we can all sit and be like, oh, these terrible things happened and woe is me, but like, I'm sure my partner Matt won't mind me talking about this, like, he had a very easy upbringing in comparison to what I had, but he always says, like, you're so much more driven and like independent and want to do things because you've had to all your life. So even though it's shit and it's upsetting, you kind of, like, I'm kind of grateful in a way, because if those things wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have a lot of the traits I have that make me successful now.
Which I love that mentality in that way, that life takes us, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Because that is so powerful, isn't it? Obviously you are that person, you've lived that. I've also lived that exact same process for different reasons. And I always swear by it, exactly what you've just said there. The whole, like, you are who you are. You know, you go through stages, don't you, of I don't know if you do personally, but like regretting who you are, regretting what you've done, regretting certain things, and wishing things were different. You know, as you're going through your growing up stages, because that's just the way the brain goes naturally.
Yeah.
But then actually, if you stop and think and reflect, you then go, fuck, hold on a minute, because of that is who I am. And like you say, you're driven. Look at the start of the podcast, all the stuff we was talking about. You probably, we never know this, right? But you probably would never have done those things if you weren't as driven as you are from the trauma, let's say, that you witnessed on your upbringing.
Yeah.
Which is just that in a whole nutshell is amazing, isn't it? You know, you think about that whole, like, yeah, the whole process of that, and then you like reflect to Matt and looking at that sort of thing. It's like, and then you look at someone else's life, don't you, and think, fuck, I just wanted a breath.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Yeah.
And I do that so often, but actually you have to take that as a blessing. Though you have to look at it as a statement of your life.
It's happened.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously as you were growing up, like, what? So your mum had TIAs, are they called?
Yeah, so it's like
I actually know what they are.
Yeah.
My mum has them.
Oh really?
It looks like I'm making this up now.
Yeah, she had that and some other little heart
I just can't remember the TIA. I can't remember what it stands for.
It's summit ischemia summit.
Something.
My nursing's really not helping me here, is
No,
it?
that's
I weren't
fine.
that kind of nurse, but yeah, it's like a mini stroke kind of.
Yeah, no,
thing,
that's what I know them as, a mini stroke.
Yeah.
So my mum had one last week,
Yeah.
and it was like, in all fairness, my mum had an aneurysm years ago.
Yeah.
And genuinely shouldn't be here now, and is a complete miracle. And she had a mini stroke last week, and I will be honest, I'm waiting for that phone call. I won't say it too much because it will literally make me cry. But I'm waiting for that phone call, and I thought that was that phone call. And it's one of those things, isn't it, where when you see that so often, I don't know, do you feel like it's made you feel that same way?
Like expecting the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean, obviously, you had this from a younger age than me, so...
Yeah, I think you always kind of... you start expecting the worst of things all the time. Fortunately, like, my mum's quite well now. But that's a horrible feeling, and it definitely is a thing when you repeatedly go, like... You have this thing right at the start of your life, and that's hard. And then you're like, okay, it's getting better now. And then you hit with something else, you're like, fuck, that's hard. And then you hit with something else. So you learn to just not expect anything that good to happen.
Yeah.
You always expect the worst of things. Well, I guess it always means it's a nice surprise when something goes well.
But that's the thing, isn't it? And again, it's one of those flip sides, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's making you stronger.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But it's also making you quite... I don't know, hunting for the negative without realising. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole, like, something's going to happen soon. Because it just does.
Yeah, it's too good to be true kind of thing. Yeah.
So has your mum recovered now? Like, what's...
Yeah, she's pretty good now.
So she's always had mini strokes, is that what it was?
Like, there was just loads of different things as I was growing up. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
But she's hopefully, touch wood, she's got a little... frozen shoulder at the moment, but we can...
That's fine.
I'll take her in for the surgery for that. I'll take that over. Seeing her in resource any day, yeah.
We'll take a frozen shoulder. No, good. So, obviously, one of your roles then, nursing. Let's dig into that, because I find this insanely interesting, like, the direction you went. But what was your position and what did you do?
So, I qualified as a learning disability nurse. And then through that... started specialising in challenging behaviour, so I worked with both adults and children.
Is this all in hospital when you say nurse?
Community.
Right? Or it can be, right, because...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I worked mainly on community. I did a couple of, I did placements and stuff as a student in hospitals. When it was COVID, I was redeployed onto a female acute mental health ward, so that was mental health hospital. But for the most part, I worked in the community. And my most recent role that I kind of left to do what I do now, I worked in CAMS within the learning disability child and adolescent mental health service. Has a really bad rep, but it's just under-resourced. Let me tell you, the clinicians in that team that I worked in cared more than anyone I know. It's just frustrating, the lack of resources. But in that role, I worked with families whose children were kind of really struggling with their behaviour, and also worked in the diagnostic process of autism and ADHD.
Yeah, so it's quite a lot. And also, let's be honest again, you're only 27, 28?
Yeah, 27.
Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? It's like...
Done quite a lot.
It's quite a lot to have... what am I trying to say? It's a lot for you to take on, isn't it? Taking other people on.
Yeah,
and helping other people that...
Yeah, it's quite emotionally draining. And I find, like, I'm a very empathic person, so... The thing in that job, there was a lot of like child protection, safeguarding stuff in there as well. The area that I worked in was quite deprived, so I cared too much about every single person that I worked with, and I think you have to be able to detach and care, and it makes you very good at your job, but it burns you out fast. Yeah. No, and it's true, and again, it's such a tough one, isn't it? Because obviously, to care immensely is the best person for them. Mm-hmm. But then you have to make sure you care for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what it all goes back to anyway. Yeah. Making sure that you're doing enough to serve you, i.e. helping people, because that's what serves you, right? That makes you feel good. Yeah. But then at the same time, you have to look after yourself. It's like what they say, isn't it? Like, all therapists have a therapist, you know, and it's important, isn't it? And it's a little bit like a coach having a coach. And they go, well, why do you need a coach? It's like, the same reason you need a coach. Like, you know, I mean, I'm at the minute, you know, solo, I'm coaching myself, but I often go through a stage of just jumping on with people just for that whole accountability. Yeah. But I think it's important to understand that, isn't it, throughout your life, that it's always important to have somebody to turn to, even whoever you want to be or think you are. Yeah. Yeah, because let's be honest, you're only thinking you are, because you're not made of metal, like, you know.
But yeah, so like going through that sort of period of you learn all this sort of stuff, like you worked with women's mental health, you said, yeah?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, we were kind of just like, these services need help. We need volunteer now. You're going there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'd not worked in female mental health. Like, obviously my background is learning disability.
Yeah.
So
is that quite a big jump, or?
It's very different, because I'm used to working with people who, for the most part, are very kind of, they've been in special schools or day services, minimal independence. Some people were getting a bit more, but not too much. And then I go into this mental health ward where some of these women have been like in high-powered jobs, they've got kids, they've got families, but they're like super mentally unwell to the point that like you wouldn't recognise them from the point that they were like before. So that was pretty difficult but interesting.
So did they? So they become mentally unwell through their life?
So you don't know. Like sometimes I think it definitely is a situational thing,
yeah.
but then there's other illnesses like bipolar and like psychosis where it's just an illness. It's the same reason you get cancer. Like, yeah, of course, lifestyle factors can impact it, but some people are just more predisposed to getting ill. And like when I say they were ill, like they're like different people, especially like when they're in the mania of the bipolar. It's not just being a bit sad or being a bit anxious. It like can ruin your life.
Yeah. But how did that make you feel to see that?
It's upsetting to see people like that when you know how they were before.
Because you've seen both sides, right?
Well, you only see them when they're admitted to the hospital, but you read their notes of like
this successful person.
But then seeing them get better, because it was an acute ward, so a lot of the time they're treated and they can recover within, like, not recover, but get a lot better within weeks. So there was one lady, she couldn't walk or talk or anything. She had what's called catatonic depression, where you literally just go into this state of like this, and then.
So your body just freezes?
Yeah, like people get stuck in positions, like you can be stuck like this, like it's crazy.
And what's it called?
It's a state of catatonia.
Wow.
And she then got to the point like a few weeks later where she was doing a puzzle and like asking me how my day was, and I was like, that's freaking mint. Like, to see how far you've come in those few weeks, that's really cool.
And you'd help to do that?
Well, I was there. I wouldn't say I was a key role in helping her, but
that makes you feel good, right?
Yeah.
And that's that thing where you can look at it and go, I'm playing a part towards this success.
Yeah, I guess.
You don't like to take that on board, do you?
I think in that context, I was very much just so in mental health wards, there's this culture, I find, of people that aren't paid enough to do what they do, so they don't really care a lot of the time. And they had, in that period of time, a load of band 6 and 7 nurses, so experienced nurses going in, basically acting as healthcare assistants. So we were doing the one-to-ones, and it was the first time in ages that these people had anyone take an interest in them, or like ask them how their day was, or sit with them for more than 5 minutes. And it really annoys me that in mental health services there's not the resources for that to happen, because when that does happen and people have that human contact and someone take an interest, they get better so much faster.
Yeah. Thing is, it's so sad, isn't it? Because it's so fucking simple. It's unbelievable. And it's one of them things as well, isn't it? Where like, is it okay? It's like if I walk past you in town and I tell you everything about me and walk off. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Though, you know that feeling sometimes. I mean, don't get me wrong. You know me enough to probably go, okay, he probably wouldn't have meant that. He's probably having a bad day or something. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you know, if you were to bump into one and you think, fucking hell, they've just chewed me ear off and walked off, and you go, wow, you literally you were one-sided. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's like in a situation like that, isn't it? Where it's like they're just ticking the box as opposed to actually caring and just going that extra mile, as they say, and you know what I mean, and just asking how are things, and it's free.
Taking an interest, not just looking at, oh, how's your illness today, but like, oh, what did you do before you came in here? Like, what things do you enjoy doing?
Yeah.
Getting to know people as a person rather than a patient.
Yeah, rather than right, because otherwise they're just clocking in, clocking out, and it, it's so sad, isn't it? Because you said it a minute ago about the whole like people not being paid enough, so therefore they don't value it. And actually, I mean, I say this all the time, and I strongly believe in it. Like, if you aren't doing something that's driving your passion, and you're doing it for the money, then you're gonna burn out.
There's this thing, I think, is it called like ikigai or something like that? It's like a Japanese thing, and it's like different factors, and it's like purpose, wealth, happiness, and it's got like different.
Right.
And it's like to be truly happy in what you do as a job, you need to have like a bit of all of these.
Right, I see where you're going now. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've seen something similar before. But it's so true, isn't it? Because if you're doing something for the money, it's going to die at some point. Because you can only go so far with that's a chore as opposed to a passion. But I always, it's like some people say, well, you know, like you talk about business and how you built your business so well. Well, I do it because I love it. Do you know what I mean? And the money actually follows because people will pay you for the stuff that we do in the line of work that we do. But no, I find it really powerful. I think it's something that so many people can take a leaf out of, can't they? Like, you know, make sure you're doing a job that you actually love.
Yeah.
Or even just your life. Make sure you're, you know, leading your life the way you love it, and better things will follow after that. Guys, I just want to take your attention for the last time here. And I just want to mention it's probably one of my favourites at the moment, to be honest, within the Silverback gym range. It's this, what I'm wearing here now, and it's the Strength Club Acid Wash range. Go over to the website, have a look. You'll find my discount code around here, whether it be in the description or on the screen, and you can go and get your discount today from Silverback. So yeah, so looking obviously like the period that you had there, would you say you've learnt a lot? Because it sounds like you would have been forced to learn so much during that period, right?
Yeah, I think in that period in like my nursing career as a whole, like I learned an awful lot about people, how people work, people's minds, and I've been able to like then take that through into what I do now with my coaching. So it's definitely
to help people again. Yeah,
definitely. But now I get to help people that want to be helped and that appreciate the help.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
So I'm going to ask you a bit of a deep personal question here now.
Yeah.
Do you think you, with your life trauma, helping other people, is a way of you continuing to hide your problems? Probably.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are very caring have that kind of background, and it's that you want to be the person that you wish you had when you were younger.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, because I've always been this way, and when I was, how old was I? Probably like 15 when I first did my coaching thing, because I wanted to help people get better at trampolining. Yeah. And then my mum's a nurse as well, so I've always seen her help people.
I feel like I make this shit up sometimes. My mum was a nurse.
Really?
Like, there's a lot of
common ground.
We're probably brothers and sisters.
Yeah, maybe. That'd be weird. But yeah, I don't think it's the sole reason, and it's not a conscious thing, but
the subconscious is more powerful,
maybe,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
potentially.
It just looks that way from me looking at things, and also obviously, you know, when you look into these things and you study these things, they're the sort of traits that happen, aren't they? Like, you're trying to help somebody because you wanted to be helped.
And I think it's you get so much experience from those things, and so I have experienced panic attacks like through my life, and it's also something that I helped people manage when I was nursing. So I know I've got first-hand experience of it, and I've got the theoretical knowledge from when I was nursing. So even just this morning, I was on a call with a client. I'm helping her with Strongwoman, but she gets panic attacks. So we were able to sit down. Okay, what happens when this first happens, and what situations are you normally in when this happens? So I can then use my experiences to help someone else, and that's cool.
Where did your panic attacks come from, do you think, or what's your trigger things?
They're completely irrational, aren't they? Well, they're not to us, but I think most of the time when I've had them, it's when I'm in busy environments where I feel out of control, and there's a lot of like sensory stimulus going on, I just start to feel really all over the shop.
Not in control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that feeling of not being in control then leads to the physical
What's next? What's
side of
gonna
it.
happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a funny one I had in a sauna once. It wasn't funny, but I thought I was literally going to die. I was in...
It's probably not the best place to be.
No, I was in the sauna, and like, I'm not the kind of person who will ask for help, as we've previously discussed.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck. I was like, I can't see. I think my blood pressure's dropping. And luckily, there was like one guy that I knew walking past. I was like, Dan, can you get a first aider, please? I can't stand up. And they came in, and yeah, then I had
Did you
panic
know you was
attack.
having a panic attack at that point?
At the start, I thought, well, my blood pressure was dropping, but then because there was people around, I didn't want to bring attention to the fact that I wasn't feeling very well, and it was really hot. Then I started panicking because I wasn't in control
Got you.
of
So-
the situation.
So that come because of it.
Yeah, so then it led to
Yeah.
like the low blood pressure, and then I was like, I've got pins and needles in my hands. And then afterwards, I was
right.
like, well, obviously you did. You're having a panic attack.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And had you had panic attacks prior to that one then?
Yeah, that's my most recent one. That was probably coming up to a year now. Like, been doing pretty well. Yeah, they're just...
It's funny, isn't it?
happen.
Because when you think about things like that, again, I've had panic attacks quite often in the past.
Twinnies.
But it's one of the things where, like, Sarah, like, we speak about them now a lot because I'm understanding a lot more about ADHD and stuff. And actually, they're not directly linked with ADHD, which you'll probably know and be able to say some bits on as well. But I feel that mine are quite linked with it because, for example, I last had one in Derby in a shopping centre. Do you know what I mean? They're always busy places, aren't they? And I have this thing about wherever I sit, and hence why I'm sitting here now. This was always going to be my space when I built this table, because I could see the door and I could see the cameras. It's annoying because I quite often look at the cameras, but it's one of those things where, like, I have certain little traits that I have to stick to keep me on track. We all do. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm different, but they're them things, aren't they? And when they go off track, that's when you find yourself into that panic sort of state. But sometimes I think the last one that I can remember, like I say, when I was out shopping, I was very stressed. It was a very busy day. I can't remember exactly what was going wrong, but I wasn't feeling the best
Yeah.
mentally. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And then you just have them things, don't you? And then all it takes is them little bits, doesn't it? Just this little tip overs. And all of a sudden I was like, that one I was actually, me and Sarah spoke about afterwards, I was really proud of myself because I actually found it early.
Yeah.
And I walked out and I was able to just actually
Control
be okay.
it.
But you know, when you think about those sort of things, and this is why I like to talk about things like this, because some people maybe experience them and never realise that's what they are.
And you
know?
get this thing with, and people, you feel like you're going to die, right? in the
Yeah,
moment.
well, does
And
your chest like
I feel like I'm
someone squeezing you and
about to die.
Yeah.
Can't breathe for shit. And people go, oh, it's just a panic attack. Just a panic attack. I thought I was on
being-
death's door.
yeah.
And people
being in the
minimise
moment,
it,
it's
yeah.
such a,
And they're horrible. And people need to recognise them for being this horrible thing and not go, oh, it's just anxiety, it's just panic. Because it's
Yeah.
really real.
Yeah. I remember once I had one. I went to go and see, and I always forget his name. Comedian, quite a big comedian, and we was in the shittest of places, watching this comedian. I mean, he was that big, he was that far back. We was on some seats that I'm pretty sure were fucking made up on the day because they were like bolted to the wall but swinging slightly.
Yeah.
I was at the top of this fucking thing, thinking, "Oh my god!" And I said to Sarah, I was like, "I'm just thinking about having a panic attack. I don't know, And then all of a sudden, then because you're thinking it, and I had to get down. This woman then told me to get back up, and then that made me panic even more because I'm like, I can't.
Get out.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another one that I had was I was on a plane back from Dublin once, perfectly fine, but then we had turbulence. And then it just triggered something for me, and then I was like in shit state. I went to the back, and the woman was like, "You need to sit down," but really shouted at me, and then I fucking had a panic attack and just I landed on her. But you know, it's one of the things, isn't it, where like being the person that's having a panic attack or feeling like that. Well, if that person was me, they wouldn't say what they said.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, so it's so different, isn't it, when you see it from a different angle? But you know, these sort of things are important to understand, important to take serious, I guess. Not to pansy around it, because let's be honest, it fucking is what it is, and just get, you know, figure out your way out of it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you have to manage these things in life, don't you? Because otherwise, they're gonna haunt you.
Yeah.
You know, because your mind will always subconsciously think about these things. And like you spoke about earlier on, triggers and stuff, there's a lot of triggers. You know, I'm sure you know a lot of things about autism and ADHD with triggers and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's so many things, isn't there, that if we ignore them, they become worse.
Yeah.
And they will constantly bite you in the ass as such, won't they? Because it's like you're not dealing with them.
And it's amazing how just by being more self-aware of, so like we both just identified situations where we're more likely to panic, and even just being aware of that. So when you're in those environments, and if your face starts to get a bit hot or your wrists start to get a bit sweaty, like, okay, this is now I can do this to make sure it doesn't get to that. So it can
My
be
first
managed.
thing is I get like itchy. I get a bit like,
Yeah.
but that's with blood, isn't it? Like just pumping.
Is panic attack something someone's born with or happened?
I'd say it's a trauma thing, isn't it?
Kinda, and it's linked with anxiety, isn't it? It's when it's your body's response to a mental feeling. It's a physical response to a mental to an emotion. Anyone can experience a panic attack. I think you're not like born.
Yeah, it's not
like
hereditary or
when I
anything
came
like
out my mum's foof, it wasn't like she's gonna have panic attacks.
Yeah,
but
better put this one back in.
But I don't think it's any coincidence about the things that we've both spoken about and the experiences that we've had and the fact that we both have had panic attacks. Like, that's not coincidence, is it?
No. And you know what's really tough as well? Like, you know, you've got to be aware of things in the day and age that we're at. But for fuck's sake, I don't want to be a snowflake. Do you know what I mean? It's hard, isn't it, to get a balance? Because I've, you know, no different to anyone else, because we've all experienced them in our own ways, but I've experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of uncomfortable periods of my life, you know, still dealing with stuff and, you know, this, that and the other. And you have to be aware, like I said a minute ago, you have to be aware of them, but at the same time, I don't want to be a fucking snowflake. Do you know what I mean? That's something that always sticks in my mind. Like, where do you stand on that? Because, you know, seeing people... Sometimes depression's fake, yeah? And that's a big statement to make, but I'll back it up and stand by it.
Okay.
Right? Sometimes depression is fake because it's not real depression. It's a state, I believe it's a state that somebody's got themselves into because they've not dealt with a situation and they've basically got themselves further into a hole and gone, I'm depressed. When there could have been something that they could have managed better before.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like people becoming too much of a victim with things, yeah? Or people going, I'm fat because I'm fat.
Yeah.
Do you get where I'm trying to go? And I feel like depression's the same as that. Well, I'm fat because I'm fat.
Yeah.
Okay, right. You're fat because you haven't done anything about you being fat.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? And I feel like that depression thing is so much the same, where it's like you have become manically depressed because you were slightly depressed before and you didn't deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's having seen the like mental illness side of thing where people really like are depressed and they can't get out of it, even when they try, they can't. Like it's really tough, and I've seen that, and I genuinely believe that is a thing. But there are other situations. So like the question that you ask on where do I stand, I think the fact that I've worked to identify when I'm having a panic attack and why it's happening, and the fact I've gone to therapy shows, you know what, bad things have happened, but I'm not here going, oh, woe with me, like, oh, what a shame, I'm just going to have to live with the fact that I have these things, I've gone and done something about it. And I think it's really important, like, if you recognise something and it's a problem for you, recognise it's a problem and go and do something about it if you have the tools and means. And if you don't, try and look for where you can find the tools and means to help yourself. And I do it with my clients. Like, if my clients are going through a tough time, or if they come to me then they happen to have anxiety, or a lot of some of my girls have been given a diagnosis of autism while they've been working with me, of course I'll go, oh, that's a lot to deal with, I'm like sorry to hear that, and then I'll help them to manage it. It's not just, and I think that's the snowflake thing, whereas if we have this snowflake thing, it's like, oh, I'm really sorry that you feel anxious, that's really sad.
That's you now.
Yeah.
That's your identity.
But instead, it's like, okay, I've got these experiences from my professional life, my personal life, and I can help you. Do you want that help?
Yeah.
Great, let's do it.
You know, why do
Yeah.
people call it toxic when you try dealing with it? People refer that as toxic in a sense. When you try dealing with tough situations.
What do you mean, like?
They label it as toxic.
Yeah, when people think you should
How the
just.
mindset of that is, get on with it.
Yeah, and I think there's the difference between get on with it and let's work through it. And I think it is, it is. I hate that word, but toxic to go. Oh, that really bad thing happened to you. Get on with it. And that really bad thing happened to you. I'm really sorry that happened. Let's try and work through it in a sensitive way that's going to get you where you want to be.
Yeah. But it's making sure that you're acknowledging it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's like that whole fat man, fat woman, whatever we want to call it, without just targeting women. You know, the fat person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just say that they had an upbringing that made them fat. Yeah. Their identity becomes, I'm a fat person. They then, for the rest of their life, take the piss out of themselves being fat. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And that's that thing, isn't it, where it's like, okay, but at some point you either have a health scare that makes you go, fuck, I'm going to change my life, or you go, I don't want to be this person anymore, and I'm going to change. But then some people don't have the tools to change.
And it's hard.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
But this is what I mean about the whole identity thing, isn't it? Because if that becomes you and your identity, you're up shit creek in regards to like how you get out of it. But at the same time, you know, and I strongly say this, and I want people to listen to this and repeat it, you can fucking change. Like, when I say change, that doesn't necessarily mean fix.
Yeah.
Does it? That doesn't mean you can be, you know, someone's not going to look like you that's been 20 stone for 30 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? So if they're looking at you going, I want to be Chloe Brennan, well, you're going to have to go through some surgery to get there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? And that is real life, right?
Yeah.
But that's something I always try and push for people to understand that there is, you know, I hate this mentality of that's it.
Change is difficult, but it can always happen.
Exactly. And it's so different for everybody, isn't it? Because people are going through different things. But it's something that I always push for people to, like, probably sometimes I may be a bit too everything's possible.
Yeah.
But I still like to continue that journey of everything's possible, because everything's more possible than you think it is. You know, and if you keep thinking that way, you can always progress, can't you? You know, go for 10, you might get 7, but you still fucking went for 10, and you might get 8 at some point.
Yeah, no, definitely,
You know,
I agree.
It's going that direction, is it? But you know, with like autism and ADHD, like obviously, like we said before, I got diagnosed with ADHD not long ago, and it's like, for me, it's changed my life massively. What sort of things do you? And I'd love you to share some things. Not, and this isn't for me; it's for other people as well. But because a lot of people, isn't there, that think they have ADHD, and there's a lot of people that suffer and struggle with certain ADHD traits.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll just add in here before I ask you the question, but like, I personally went through diagnosis, and it cost me a fucking lot of money, because obviously I didn't wait for the NHS, and I went through diagnosis simply because there was too many things that I was struggling with in my life that was hindering me and making me wish to not feel that way.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be wishing to not feel that way, because it was a very weird situation. Do you know what I'm saying? So I went through that diagnosis to be like, I need to find out more about myself.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've learned so much, it's insane.
Yeah.
And I'm far from now feeling good, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, you know, because you've seen it on the other side, and also you've not got autism or ADHD, you know?
No.
So you being that sort, how do you see all that sort of stuff, like, you know, working with people and...
Yeah, I think, so first, I think an important thing to say is that both of those things are massively underdiagnosed in women, and
that's what they say,
misdiagnosed as mental illness. So a lot of women with autism will get diagnosed with like borderline personality disorder, or eating disorders are a big one. But actually it's more like the sensory thing and the control thing that comes with autism than it is an eating disorder. So that's one thing that is massively kind of wrong with the system. But I think it's kind of getting there now. But I think I like, if I see it from like a diagnostic point of view, then obviously there's different factors that come into each. So like autism, people are going to have difficulty with social communication. They're going to have difficulty with sensory processing.
There's a lot of sensory
Yeah,
stuff,
so
isn't there?
the triad of impairment. So there's communication, sensory thing. It's been a while since I've done this, and then I think it is like relationships are difficult and like understanding social situations as well.
Emotions.
Yeah, and reading
Yeah.
emotions and not understanding
Yeah.
people's emotions is really difficult. And I think that a lot of us identify with these things, but when you have that condition, it impacts your life. So we can all. So for me, for example, I find it really uncomfortable being in really loud situations, but it's not going to ruin my day. I can just about manage it, or I might, I don't know, find it difficult to understand how you're feeling one day because you're not quite getting there. But imagine literally looking at someone and not having a clue what they're thinking or feeling.
Yeah.
That's really freaking hard. And like the ADHD stuff, the hyperfocus, where you get like really obsessed with shit to the point that it can detriment other areas of your life.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes the diagnosis. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I've got ADHD because I really like this and I can't concentrate on something for too long. It's like, okay, does it really impact your life to the detriment of other things? And that's when I think there's a big thing with like TikTok and everything, and it's great because it's getting more people to reach out for diagnosis like yourself, but it also really undermines the diagnosis at the same time. And people are like, oh, I've got ADHD because they have a slight issue, and sometimes it might well be, and it's great that you can then go on that thing, but at the same time, like, don't just diagnose yourself because you find one thing a little bit difficult, because it really undermines the shit that other people go through.
It's nice to hear you say it like that, because when I got diagnosed, obviously I'm sure you know, like that 3-hour, it's horrendous.
That interview.
Like, yeah. Obviously you have your pre and then you have your post, or the main one. And I cried fucking. I took Sarah with me because it was good to have someone with you as well, isn't it? Like to understand things. But I cried fucking multiple times. Came out there feeling like absolute shit. Mm-hmm. Like, and the thing is, that's normal, because obviously you're not talking about the best things in your life, and you're not painting the best picture of yourself. Which I paint a really good picture of myself, because it's what you do, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're telling all these things, so it's really hard, isn't it? But it's good to hear you say it like that, because so many people, like you say, have one or two things and they go, I have ADHD. You know, if I'm honest, the only reason I actually said I wasn't going to talk about ADHD when I got diagnosed, but you know what, I talk about so much mindset stuff, and it's such a powerful quality to know and to help other people, that then I thought, actually I will. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not about wearing it as a fucking label. It doesn't need to. Do you know what I mean? You don't need to say, I have that, so I'm allowed to do certain shit, because actually that's the opposite again. That's having that same, similar to a snowflake mentality of like, well, because of and again, it's not your identity.
I always, when people were diagnosed, I always used to say, you're not autistic, you have autism. Correct. Or I'm not ADHD, you are someone who has it.
Yeah, no, and it's true, and it just depends, doesn't it, if it affects your life enough for you to have to understand it more, and that's literally why I did it personally. But with the people that you met, I guess it helps you find out more about yourself, right? Because you were then studying people. Yeah,
you overthink everything.
In a deeper level, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely made me more aware of like the control thing, the need for routine. And I was like, oh, all of these traits are very similar to someone with ASD, with autism. But then when I had my therapy, actually those traits are very common in people who've experienced trauma as well. Yeah. And it crosses over.
Yeah. Whether it's hereditary, not hereditary, what's the word? Genetically, or whether it's trauma related.
Yeah. And that's another thing, like a lot of people who have attachment disorder from like a young age are misdiagnosed as autistic when actually it's attachment.
Yeah. Well, I got diagnosed initially with bipolar.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, so I had bipolar, and I deemed with bipolar. And then all of a sudden, no, you've got ADHD. And it was actually a weird kick in the bollocks. Obviously, I cried. I knew she was going to say I had it, but I cried because it's just that whole fuck of relief and everything else. But at the same time, it was like a relief of I've not got bipolar. Do you know what I mean? And it was weird. I was never medicated, but still, it was labelled as it. So it's hard. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to talk about within that, isn't there? It is very deep. So, what is next for you? Where are you going? And where can people see you?
Yeah, so In terms of like my coaching, I'm growing my coaching business, which is fab. I really enjoy it. I'm trying to help more people. I've got my Power Up project coming out soon, which I'm very excited for, and just continue with my one-to-one stuff, which I love. We've touched on kind of what I do within that. And like athlete-wise, I've got Europe's Strongest Woman coming up. Then
3 weeks from now,
the Natural World Strongman and Giants Live Britain's Strongest Woman, which is very exciting. Can't
when's
wait.
Giants Live?
That is the 30th of September at Doncaster Dome. We're making history and it's going to be sick. I can't wait.
So if you are not already, make sure you get your tickets.
Get your tickets. Yes. Let's sell it out.
No, but honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. So thank you very much for taking your time. Even though I sent you back to go and get me a present.
It's all right. I'll give you. It's only £2.50.
Well, you'll get over it one day. But no, honestly, Claire, I really, really appreciate it. It's been wicked talking. And where can people find you to follow you? And
yeah, so main things I use are Instagram, which is Chloe Brennan X, and then YouTube is Chloe Brennan Strongwoman. I was doing sick at that, uploading every week, but I want to get back to that because it was good fun. So go follow me.
Subscribe there, and she'll do another video.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I will.
But no, appreciate it. Big love, and I'm sure we've shared some really good stories with everyone.